Yep, great. So this meeting is being recorded. We wanted to let you know that. We ask that you please keep your cameras off and your microphones muted. You can actually keep your cameras on if you would like, but please keep your microphone muted unless you're going to be speaking, such as when we do our breakout groups. We ask that you feel free to use a chat box. You could share your name, your pronouns, where you're, if you're with an organization, and of course, if something that you're looking forward to, that if you could put that in the chat, that would be wonderful. We have a lot of great people who have joined us today, and really grateful for you to be here. We have Spanish translation, and we have Jessica Serna Castañeda, who is going to be helping us with the translation. Me gustaría darles la bienvenida a todos ustedes. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos. Les pedimos que por favor en el chat pongan su nombre, la organización que representan, si vienen con una organización, y algo de lo cual están esperando ver o hacer. Tenemos una traductora, Jessica Serna Castañeda, que nos acompaña. Y si quieren escuchar esta presentación en español, les pedimos por favor que vean el icono que está en la parte de abajo de la página. Es un icono de un globo, y les pedimos por favor que cambien el idioma al español para escuchar la presentación en español. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos. All right, and so we have meeting participants with people of all ages and students of all ages. So we want to ask you please to use the chat to ask questions or support and affirm what is being shared. And of course, you may chat with others in the meeting as well. We're again excited if you'd like to shout out to somebody to thank them for something that they're saying or something that really touched you, to please share that and to let them know how it has made you feel. We would like to start. This is a new tradition that we have been incorporating into many of our presentations out of respect for the stewards of this land that we happen to be living on and working on. And we've been beginning our meetings with a land acknowledgement. And I'd like to read to you this land acknowledgement, which was provided to us by the Amamutsun tribal band. And it reads, the land on which we gather is the unceded territory of the Awaswa-speaking Yupi tribe. The Amamutsun tribal band, comprised of the descendants of indigenous people taken to missions Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast, is today working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and heal from historical trauma. If you didn't get a chance to participate last week in our equity series with a focus on environmental justice, we had Chairman Lopez, who is the chairman of the Amamutsun tribal band, speak to us and share some just powerful stories and kind of philosophies of how environmental justice applies to the tribes that were the people that were here long before we came here, and just out of respect to that community, those people, and out of respect to the land itself, we share this land acknowledgement and celebrate our history here in the Central Coast. We want to say thank you to some amazing partners. And when I say amazing, I'm talking about people who are committed, passionate, thoughtful, and have such a heart for our youth and for our community. We get to work with some amazing people that join us in this work, people that help guide us, support us. And this includes members of the Santa Cruz County Office of Education LGBTQ+ task force. We also work with the Santa Cruz Diversity Center, the Queer Youth Task Force, and Safe Schools Project and their collaboration. I see Ron Indra in the house. Ron, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your leadership over all these years. Of course, with Rob Darrow, who's also works with us at the County Office of Education. Want to thank all the educators and students across the county for helping to facilitate our breakout rooms. One of the things that we pride ourselves is that we have students who are our speakers, who are our leaders, who are our facilitators. And in many ways, they're the highlight of everything that we do at the County Office of Education, and especially in our equity series. And so it's such an honor to be able to share the space with our amazing students. and educators who are helping us today. And we also want to thank our student panel members who are also going to be talking, and creators of and video creators. We have a special keynote speaker, Peter DeWitt, who we'll be introducing a little bit later, who's an inspiring leader in education, and is going to be talking to us today about something he doesn't usually talk to us about, which is something I'm really excited to hear his words today. And especially, of course, we want to thank all of you. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for taking, we know how the last few months, several months have been so tiring, exhausting for our community. And the fact that you're taking the time to join us, to celebrate our students, to be able to participate and learn and share is wonderful. And we are so grateful to you for that. It is in partnership that we're able to accomplish many great things. And so we're grateful to all of the partners who support us and celebrate and work with us on this important work. So I'd like to review our agenda for tonight. We're going to start with of course, the welcome. We are going to do a kickoff for our LGBTQ plus History Month. Rob and the Safe Schools Initiative have really inspired us to ensure that we are creating these opportunities to share with our community, for the community to learn about the rich history of LGBTQ plus leaders and in our community. We're going to be sharing some data with you, some key findings from our community. I'll be introducing Peter DeWitt, who is an educational leadership coach, who will be speaking with us. We'll hear from a student panel. We'll be talking about their own experiences. And then we'll go into breakout groups and have a community discussion. And then we'll return back to a whole group, and we will wrap up, and we'll be closing our event. And so, as you can see, lots of exciting information that we'll be sharing with you today. So one of the, I'm gonna move this out here. So I'd like to share with you just a few of the things that we've been working on since March that we would like you to know that we're doing on behalf of our LGBTQ plus community. We implemented, working with all the school districts across the county, we implemented a rainbow flag flying in celebration of Hardman Milk's birthday that took place in May. And it was beautiful to see flags on our flagpoles in almost every school in the county this last May. We've increased the number of mental health counselors throughout in the County Office of Education, and this is not something only unique to us, but this is true across the county, in that there has been such a focus on an awareness of the needs of students and mental health when it comes to their mental health and their behavioral health, and with a specific focus on the needs of our LGBTQ plus students, many of whom had really tough time during the time while we were in distance learning. And we've continued to partner with the Diversity Center, the Safe Schools Project, and mental health service providers to ensure mental health services for students when needed. And that advocacy and that support really, I think, again, is a reflection of the great partnerships that we continue to build on behalf of students. And so I'd like to introduce somebody who probably is no stranger to many of you if you have worked in support of LGBTQ plus students and community members. Rob Darrow, who is part of the Safe Schools Project, but also works with us at the County Office of Education as a consultant. He is a history teacher or a social studies teacher back in the day, and he continues to teach as a professor at the university. He continues to work with staff members, with students every single day, and has been a great support for us at the county office and helping to guide our equity work when it comes to serving our LGBTQ plus students in our community. I'd like to welcome Dr. Rob Darrow. Welcome, Rob.
Thanks, Ferris. So I was reflecting on the pandemic and all that we've all been through. And the exciting part is really that we continued our ongoing work across Santa Cruz County to better provide more services for all of our students, but in particular our LGBTQ plus students. So we are excited to mark this moment as the kickoff for LGBTQ plus History Month. This is our second annual LGBTQ plus History Month. So hopefully those of you who are here, you're getting to hear this first. So on the next slide, you will see that we've got this great list of LGBTQ plus history people, some who are in Santa Cruz and some who are across the United States. All of these people you see here are in the history social science framework in our state of California and should be taught in all of our schools and all of our classrooms and the different events as well. I can't help but add that in 2025, it will be our 50th anniversary of Santa Cruz Pride, and you'll see many of these people there. So that was kind of a hint to one of the answers there. At the end of the month, all students are invited to come to our trivia night, which you'll find on our website, which you'll see in the chat and different places throughout this event. So this is the beginning of that. Go learn about these people for yourselves individually, share them with your classes, share them with your students, share them with your families. This is a perfect activity for the dinner table every night at your household. So that's that piece. And then the next slide is specifically for teachers on this link that's there. And again, we'll put it in the chat for you in just a second. Stephanie Sumarna, who works at the county office, and myself and other teachers across the county have put together, here's what you can do every day of the year, of the month, if you have the time, whether you have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 15 minutes. There are different pieces to do, and we've curated a whole list of resources that teachers can use and hopefully will be teaching their students, because across Santa Cruz County, our overall vision is that we become the most inclusive and the most affirming county in the United States. And we continue to work towards that in a variety of different ways. We thank all the teachers who are already involved doing a lot of work towards supporting our LGBTQ students. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Ferris.
You're on mute, Ferris.
Thank you so much. Before we transition into talking about the findings, I would just like to thank Rob for his leadership and his support, and just always having you've been such a great inspiring leader for us, and so just really lots of thanks to Rob for his great work. I want to confirm, am I going to be the one sharing this data? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So one of the things that we kind of pride ourselves in at the county out here at the Santa Cruz County Office of Education is being able to use data to inform our work. And one of the important key data points that we have been utilizing to help us with understanding one dimension, one aspect of what students are experiencing has been the California the CHIC survey, which is the California Healthy Kids Survey. California Healthy Kids Survey, yeah, Kids Survey, CHIC survey. And so we'd like to share with you just some pieces of information about the data that we've gotten from the CHIC survey, because it represents an opportunity for us to kind of gain some insight. And one of the things that we were able to do over the last, with the data that we got over the last few years, has been to be able to look at how different students answer the same question, to be able to understand exactly how students who identify as LGBTQ, how they respond to the same questions in comparison to their peers who do not identify as LGBTQ. And so the most striking question that gave me, just absolutely rocked me when I got this, when we first ran this report, and was asking the question, have you seriously considered suicide in the last 12 months? And I was devastated to find out that our LGBTQ students, 46% of students who answered this question answered in the affirmative, that they had seriously considered suicide in the past year, nearly half of our students. And this is very close to how it looks in for the CHIC survey in California. And so much higher, of course. We wouldn't want any of these numbers to be anything higher than 0%, of course. But when we see the comparison of what our LGBTQ students are living, we have to recognize the deep trauma, the deep pain that they're experiencing for them to be considering suicide. And of course, it is something that we when we looked at the trends year after year, we are seeing that that number is in fact getting reduced, which is the good news. But the numbers are still extremely high, and a reminder of the work that we need to do to create safe schools, to create as many supports as possible for our LGBTQ students. When we look at students who've experienced harassment or being bullied because they were gay or lesbian, or because somebody thought they were, we see eightfold the number of students who are experiencing harassment or being bullied because they were gay or lesbian, or thought or others thought they were. Again, almost half of our students experiencing this. And our numbers are a little bit better than the California numbers, and still extremely high. When we look at students who've experienced violence or threats of violence in the past 12 months, you'll see a different kind of map, which shows the students in that teal color, also above 45% for our gay and lesbian students. And that's the term LGB. I think we use the, I don't think we use LGBT. It is LGBT versus gay and lesbian. That's because that's actually how the Chick survey has different questions for how students identify themselves. But you'll see that when it comes to students who've experienced violence in the past 12 months, our gay and lesbian students nearly double the other students. Students who've this is students who've been made fun of or insulted or called names. Nearly 50% of our gay and lesbian students who've been threatened with harm or injury, about a quarter of our students. When it comes to students being pushed, shoved, slapped, hit, or kicked, 29% of our gay and lesbian students, and students who've been in a physical fight, about 20% of our students. You can just see how disproportionate it is that our gay and lesbian students are experiencing this violence in the last 12 months. And so before I move on to the next part of the presentation, I would like you to know that we are continuing to look at this data. We are seeing a positive trend and a reduction in this. And we want you to hear that we are deeply committed to continuing this positive trend, both in looking at this quantitative data that's coming from surveys of students, but also, of course, in our work directly with students and what they are experiencing. We feel we have deep commitment to ensuring that we're creating the very safest schools we possibly can for students, so that they can be a haven for them and a place where they don't experience they don't have these kinds of experiences. All right. So how has the pandemic impacted our LGBTQ students? And I think that at this point, we're going to be, I'm going to be introducing Tashi, who's going to be talking to us about from their own experience, what it's been like for you, Tashi. What has it been your experience, and what has been the experience of our other LGBTQ students? What have they experienced during the pandemic? Tashi?
Hello, thank you, Ferris. I'm Tashi, I use they, them pronouns. I'm currently a junior in high school, so I've just been through the 1.5 years of distance learning that all of the students have gone through, and I've been asked to talk a little bit about how the pandemic has impacted LGBTQ students. So I think that the first thing that comes to all of our minds about this pandemic is like the quarantine and the isolation, and how we've been doing everything from home and online. And that can mean a lot of different things for different people and for different groups within LGBTQ students, because there are some students for whom home is like a safe space and school is a place where they feel unsafe. And then there is also the reverse, where home can feel unsafe, or people don't feel able to come out to their families, but are able to form communities at school. So I think that for kids who live in those unsupportive home environments, this like sudden isolation in that environment without an ability to go to school or to make bubbles out in the world where they feel safe, that can be really damaging, to be trapped in an unsupportive environment. And it's also, we should take into account that people who have been in unsupportive environments for this time, that's kind of compounded on top of what we've all been experiencing, like this grief and fear, because it's a really dark time regardless of whether you're LGBTQ or whether your family is supportive of you. So it can be doubly hard for some students who are maybe not in the best home situation. It's also true that some LGBTQ kids have been able to connect with their families during quarantine, and I think we should acknowledge families who have created safe spaces for their kids, and like who are providing them with an opportunity to feel safe and welcomed in their homes, like during this time when we've spent so much time with our families. Like, I personally am really lucky, and I've been able to get closer with my family, and I think grew a lot in quarantine in a lot of ways. But as we're emerging from quarantine and going back to school, I think we should think about kids who have spent this time in a difficult place with their families and try to make returning to school a really positive thing and make school a welcoming and safe space. So for a little more on that and some other information, we have Q.
Thank you so much, Tashi. So I was part of the March LGBTQ+ town hall. And during that event, we had adults and kids meet in breakout rooms to identify some recommendations to educators about what they could do to make our schools safer for LGBTQ+ students. And the top recommendations from all groups were as follows. Students' pronouns should always be respected, and school staff members should include their pronouns in their email signature, their Zoom name, and when they introduce themselves. There should be ongoing training for educators on how to be an ally. There should be gender-neutral bathrooms and safe locker rooms and changing spaces. LGBTQ+ lessons, speakers, and topics should be integrated across the curriculum at all grade levels. All classrooms and teachers should be safe spaces for LGBTQ+ students. There should be common messaging such as safe space posters or stickers across all schools in Santa Cruz County. There should be more education for parents and family members, and more listening to student voices and input regarding school decisions and policies. There should be a GSA at every school, and ongoing training for all teachers across the county about current laws and policies related to LGBTQ+ students.
Thank you so much, Q and Tashi. I have to say that I think next time we're going to put you in charge and be the MCs of this. You did an outstanding job, and we are so grateful for the feedback and the information and the reminder of the recommendations that came out of the conversation we had at our March event. So thank you. And now I have the pleasure of welcoming our keynote speaker. And I have to share with you that I know of Peter DeWitt mainly because he gets to work at Salinas Union High School District, which is where my wife works. And he's doing amazing work over there in support and partnership with the folks over at Salinas Union High School District. But Peter DeWitt is somebody who's been working a lot of years. He worked many years in education as a teacher and a principal. He provides support, leadership coaching and workshops for current school leaders to create a culture of collaboration and instructional leadership. And of course, he fosters inclusive school climates. He coaches school-based principals, directors, instructional coaches, teacher leaders, and in both, he does it both in person and of course now even more so remotely. In the summer of 2021, Mr. DeWitt created a year-long on-demand asynchronous coaching course through Thinkific, where he has created a community of learners that includes K-12 educators in leadership positions. One of the reasons I'm so excited about having Peter here join us today is because he wrote, actually, and I apologize, it's Dr. DeWitt, but Dr. DeWitt wrote his dissertation on how to create safe spaces for LGBTQ youth. And so we thought how appropriate for somebody who's been working, who has a lot of experience as an educator and as an instructional coach, and also who has a deep kind of theoretical as well as hands-on experience with developing these inclusive school climates, to come speak with us and share his experiences. So we'd like to welcome Dr. Peter DeWitt.
Ferris, thank you very much. And I'd like to thank Ferris and Rob for inviting me. I'm joining you from upstate New York, so it's actually 3 hours later here for me. But I'm honored to talk about this. And, you know, Ferris actually mentioned this a little bit earlier. This is not, believe it or not, a topic that I get to talk about that often. I spend a lot of time talking about instructional leadership and collaborative leadership and focus on school coaching. But dignity for all is something that has been a focus of mine over the years. But unfortunately, one of the reasons why I don't get the opportunity to talk about it that often is because where I present in the world, and I do a lot of work internationally as well as nationally, sometimes I'm actually banned from talking about the topic. And I think that's a part that I want to be able to focus on. I have to admit, when Ferris and Rob asked me to speak, I was a little bit intimidated because, you know, for me, California, I feel like gets so much of it right. And so much of the, when you're talking about curriculum and you're talking about GSAs in every school, you know, I think those are really important things to talk about. And that is not something that's happening across the United States. So there's a little bit of an intimidation factor on my part to talk about these different pieces of school climate that need to be included. So I want to give you a focus for the presentation. One thing that you're going to notice is that I'm using a tool called Mentimeter, and I'm actually asking that you be a part of this. And you're going to see another slide in just a second, but here's the deal. I want to communicate with you. I write for Education Week. I run a web show called A Seat at the Table. Seeing the chat box, hearing dialogue, reading what you're saying, really, really important for me in the brief time that we're going to be together. So one of the best ways that I've understood how to do this is through the use of Mentimeter. So what you'll see at the top of the screen, and you can actually open it up in your phone, and you can open it up on a separate tab on your computer. I promise you, you will not get spam email. There's nothing like that. But if you go to www.menti.com, and there is a code just for us, just for right now, it's 5669-8691. And I use this all the time when I'm doing remote work because of the fact it is anonymous. So what you put in there, we will not know it is you who is saying it. And I think that's really important for a conversation. For those of you that want to keep using the chat box, please feel free to do that. But for those of you that don't feel so comfortable and yet you want to ask questions or you want to make comments, please use Mentimeter. And I'm going to know you're doing that because I'm going to see that heart in the lower right-hand corner float up. So I'm hoping that at least a few of you do it. Thank you for at least one of you for doing that. There's a focus for the presentation that I want to be able to do with you. I want to talk about school climate and how important it is. I know the Q you were talking about, you know, a GSA in every school and so many wonderful things. These are things that I've been talking about for a while. And believe it or not, as much as it is important to create an inclusive school climate, there are lots of schools that I work with around the United States and also around the world that don't necessarily do that. Ferris was actually talking about some staggering statistics, and I'm going to give you a few more from GLSEN, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, a group that I've worked with over the past 10 or 12 years since I did my doctoral research. And it's really important to talk about the student engagement standpoint because this is not just, you know, I get pushback a lot. I've been writing the Education Week Finding Common Ground blog since 2011. And when I would write about LGBTQ topics, I would get a lot of hate mail from people through email. I would get a lot of negative comments. And what we need to know is that this is more than just some soft topic we have to talk about. This is about how do we engage all of the students that are coming in our doors, not just the ones that kind of go through unscathed. This is about how do we become more inclusive. And believe it or not, a few months ago, I was running a workshop just in Western New York, not too far away from me. And I had a person come to me privately and she said, yeah, I think we're too inclusive in the school district. And I thought, wow, I've actually never heard that before. I've never heard somebody say they've been too inclusive. Why adults are nervous. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of not only what happened to me when I was doing my doctoral research and writing my first book, but it's also about the fact that in the past few months, I've received emails about presentations that they don't want me to talk about LGBTQ topics. And then last but not least, much to what our students were talking about, I'm going to offer some enabling conditions to foster a more supportive climate. So I'd like to thank those of you who signed up. Like I said, Mentimeter is a great tool, and I promise you it is anonymous. I know you don't know me, you're from the West Coast, I'm from the East Coast, but I'm not telling you an untruth where this is concerned. And the code is 5669 8691. You're going to see it at the top of other screens as well. So let's start by hearing about it from you. I'd like to connect what I'm going to talk about to actually what you need. So why don't you talk to me, whether you're an adult, I know that there are parents in here, and I just want to say thank you so much to the parents and families who are a part of this discussion. Or if you are a student or a teacher who's a part of this, what is your biggest challenge right now when it comes to the topic and the inclusion of LGBTQ students? Would you please write that in? I'll give you a minute to think about your biggest challenge. And I see some people typing, so I know we're going to be able to read something very soon. And like I said, this is anonymous, and this is why I want to connect what your thoughts are with what I'm going to say. So I'll give about 45 more seconds, see if people put something in here. It's that awkward silence, right? Thank you. Thank you for putting these. So finding the best messages for parents and families who are not comfortable bridging cultural differences, reaching parents and families about LGBTQ issues, making sure everyone feels welcome and create belonging, supporting all staff, right? Helping people get more comfortable with using pronouns, absolutely. Having an in-depth personal knowledge about history. Huge challenge is that it seems that both students and staff alike are learning what it means to be together again. Lots of behavior changes, absolutely. And we can talk about that. How do I better advocate for their equity when they're not proud of any label? Absolutely. And adults not valuing students' experiences. As a parent, managing my fear for my child if they end up in a less inclusive community. Absolutely. And thank you for putting that, because that is very real. How to support educators when they get pushback from parents. My biggest challenge as a student is to phrase what I want to say about the issues I face in a way that's palatable to adults in positions of authority. If you wrote that, I think you can actually, I know you can advocate for your biggest challenges. Collaborating with elementary staff on appropriate curriculum and conversation, ongoing training for staff, being a progressive county that is somewhat hypocritical and not open to supporting LGBTQ students. It's a very interesting comment, and I'd like to come back to a couple of these: outdated education materials and textbooks. Number one, how do I better advocate for their equity when they're not proud of any label? I have to be honest with you. I came out in 1996 when I was 26 years old, and it was not an easy thing for me. In fact, I worked in a couple of schools because, as Ferris said, I was a teacher. I was a teacher for 11 years and a principal for 8 years. And when I first started as a teacher, it was not an inclusive community. It was not okay to actually talk about being gay. And to be honest with you, some of this is a little uncomfortable for me in this position of talking about safeguarding LGBTQ students, because of the fact that I was so used to just trying to fit in that label thing was uncomfortable for me. And I think we have to find a balance where that is concerned. The other thing is, being in a progressive county that is somewhat hypocritical, not open to supporting LGBTQ students, that is not unheard of. Actually, I run a web show called A Seat at the Table for Education Week. And a few months ago, we actually talked about critical race theory, which we know is a very hot topic across the country. And I can see Ferris's head shaking yes for this one for sure. And you know, we should always be thankful to our county superintendents, especially like Ferris, who are willing to put up the fight for that. But one of the things that happened is I interviewed 2 students. They were seniors graduating, and their teacher about project-based learning. And they were talking about Black Lives Matter, and they wrote an article, an op-ed for Education Week, where they talked about how they were in a very liberal town and a very liberal school district, and they all had Black Lives Matter signs, but it was somewhat hypocritical because they would do whatever they could to make sure that their white children were actually at the forefront of everything. So I want to thank you for putting this in there. And I think that's one of the things that we need to be able to talk about when we talk about an inclusive community. So what are you hoping for tonight? And I know this is a little similar to the challenges, but what are you hoping from me? And let's make this super quick because I know I don't have a lot of time, but what are you hoping to hear from me tonight? I'll give you less than a minute, so you're gonna have to type very, very fast.
¿Todo bien?
We'll just make sure we stay muted. Let's see, what are you hoping for tonight? And this isn't just for me either. We can even talk about the panel. How to encourage others to be supportive of LGBTQ students. Definitely we'll talk about that. More tools to help me make them feel safe and loved. And I have to be honest, I don't know you. And this is anonymous, but I can tell the fact that that is something that you were hoping for just shows how much you probably do already. To understand more and advocate better, how to support educators who are facing pushback. You know, I think it starts from the top. That's one of the wonderful things about getting to know Ferris, is that I think it really does start with our school leadership from the district down, and for in your case, the county down. To be inspired to continue advocating. You know, the fact that you were having this discussion tonight and it's being recorded and it's being put out there and they've invited me in to speak just shows how much county wants to move forward with this kind of discussion, how much they do want to advocate, share the most impactful actions an administrator can take. I can, you know what, I can totally do that for you. So thank you for putting those in. So let's get started with a little bit more. You know, I said that I was sort of this uncomfortable advocate. So what happened for me is back in about 2008, I was starting my doctoral program and I was looking at different studies that I was going to do. And one of my doctoral coaches actually came to me and said, I think you should focus on LGBT students. And at that time, please know that we referred to, it wasn't LGBTQ, it was LGBT was sort of the typical word, the typical acronym that we used, including GLSEN. And, you know, I sort of live in a bubble. I've had a partner for 20 years. I have a very supportive family. Were they supportive at the beginning? Not necessarily, but they really came around and they're very supportive. In fact, my nephew just got married on Saturday and I officiated the wedding with his wife. So, so very supportive family. And when he said, you know, I want you to focus on safeguarding LGBT students, I said, is that really an issue? Like, is that something that is going to be an issue? Because I was really sort of that clueless because of the community that I lived within. So when I was starting to do my doctoral research, one of the things that I came across is a lot of research from GLSEN, something you're going to see in a little while as well, some updated research from them. But an interesting thing happened for me. I was a school principal. We dealt with millions of dollars of budget cuts, very small school district in upstate New York, 3,200 students. And we had to close a one classroom per grade level school. And I had to absorb the whole population into my elementary school where I was a principal. And a hate blog started. And at the same time, I was trying to do my lit review and I was doing all this research. The woman who was writing the hate blog actually started to target some of the administrators because we happen to be gay. And I remember thinking, wow, this is how I feel. And at the time I was 39, 40 years old. And I thought, I'm uncomfortable and I feel like I'm being bullied, for a lack of a better way of saying it. And I have my doctorate and I'm a school principal. Imagine what it's like to be a 13, 14, 15-year-old student. And it really changed my perspective as I was going through all of this work. And so ultimately what happened is the doctoral research that I did, which I finished in 2010, became a book called Dignity for All, Safeguarding LGBT Students. One of the things that was very interesting for me that happened too is when I was initially doing my doctoral research and getting ready to do surveys, I canvassed most school districts in New York State. what is often seen as a progressive state. So one of you that wrote The Hypocritical Nature, New York State tends to be seen as liberal. But when I canvassed superintendents around New York State to ask them if I could survey teachers to get an understanding of how they understand LGBT students, I got turned down from 90% of the school districts in New York State. In fact, I had a superintendent that wrote to me when I asked her if I could do my surveys. She wrote back in a response in an email that said, no. That's all she wrote. Now, sarcastically, I wanted to get back to her and say, so I feel like you're on the fence about this. Is there a little bit more that I could say? But I decided not to do that. And I just moved on. Luckily, I was able to get into a few schools. Over the years, though, one of the interesting things that's happened is that, and much like that person that was concerned about the label, I was concerned that I was going to get a label as the gay principal. And I needed to find a balance where that was concerned because I was interested in a lot of different topics. Being gay is a part of who we are, but it's not all of who we are, right? We want to be able to be accepted, and we need to accept ourselves. That's where it starts. I chased around so much acceptance from other people that I forgot that it started with me, and we need to be able to do that. Last year, in 2020, I actually wrote an article for a very large organization that I've written for before called Educational Leadership, or published by ASCD, and it goes out to about 167 countries. And they asked me to write an article on being openly gay as a school administrator, and I did. And I have to admit, even at 51 years old, there was still a bit of a nervousness to be able to go out when you're putting yourself out there in such a personal way. What I want to be able to focus on and take this away from me and the doctoral research or me as Dr. DeWitt is to focus on what this means for a school climate. What it really starts with, and what I learned over the years, is that it starts with our leadership actions. We need to make sure, and I used to study the yearbook, and I had kids at a very young age that their parents would come to me to say, they're showing signs that they might come out and those kind of things. And what we know from research is that we've had students as young as 8 to 10 years old who have actually started to come out. It starts with my actions as a leader to show as many ways as possible that I accept these students and that I can walk around and they're a part of our school. There is much of an important part of our school as any other student that is in our school. But it also comes with our teacher relationships. It comes with the idea of how are we building those student-teacher relationships? What it also means is that some of this is really scary for our teachers. And it means that we have to build what's called collective efficacy, something I'll talk about in a minute. Collective efficacy is actually a shared conviction that we can work together regardless of what challenge, and we can have an impact on student learning. And what we know is that some teachers feel very nervous talking about LGBTQ issues. So collective efficacy is actually really important because it means that those who don't know as much or are not as informed are willing to work with those teachers who are very informed to talk about how can we make a better place for our LGBTQ students, which is basically any minoritized student population in our school. It comes to student engagement, and then also it's about making sure that we're creating family engagement. Now, school climate from the National School Climate Center is about making sure that we're fostering a positive school experience, that we're fostering youth development. And that means we need to take some very specific actions. And it means that we have to understand things like student engagement. The thing about school climate is that we can do all of these things that we're going to talk about tonight. And I'm going to give you some of these surface level enabling conditions is what I call them. But what we also have to remember is that culture eats climate for breakfast. That we can talk about these things at a school climate level, but what we really want to make sure is how are people talking about this work when they go out to the parking lot after a faculty meeting? Because what happens with a culture is the longer you swim in a culture, the more invisible it becomes. And people don't always know that they're part of a toxic culture. So making sure that we're calling out this hostile environment, and I'm going to talk about a little bit, a few ways to be able to do that. What it comes down to for me is the idea of student engagement. So for me, when I get pushback, and I certainly do pushback, you're actually going to see an email that I received a couple of months ago. When I get pushback on talking about minoritized populations or marginalized populations, I always take it back and say, but we need to be concerned about student engagement, correct? Because as educators, our job is to make sure that all of our students feel engaged within their schools. And there are two reasons that research shows us that students do not feel engaged. It comes from Ototola from 1972, and this is as relevant today in 2021 as it was in 1972, because what Ototola found is that students feel alienated for two reasons. Number one, identification. They don't feel a sense of belonging to his or her school. We're going to talk about enabling conditions, but we have to make sure that in order to create that sense of belonging, for those of you that are adults that are looking for ways to engage, Rob talked about LGBTQ plus history. And it's that, but it's also things like, what about the books that we see in libraries or the classroom libraries? I was a former first grade teacher in a high poverty city school outside of New York City. I had a very diverse class. I made sure that the picture books that were offered to the students were a positive representation of those students. One of the things that I found in my doctoral research was that most of the curriculum that was found in schools in New York State, and this was over 10 years ago though, was in health class, and it focused on HIV and AIDS. It's not that HIV and AIDS is a topic we shouldn't be talking about. In fact, my partner actually oversaw all of the grant funding for every AIDS organization in New York State. So talking about HIV and AIDS is a very important topic. But when that is the only thing that you see, is that the only reference you see in health class, and you don't see books and curriculum anywhere else, it sends a very direct message. The other is powerlessness, that students don't actually feel like they have a voice in their own learning. That's why the student panel, to me, is going to be very powerful this evening as well. Having that voice in your education, having a voice in your district, and then people hearing you and doing something about it is really important. I want to give some statistics that add on to what Ferris was talking about earlier. And this comes from 2019 National School Climate Survey. We know the climate, we saw the definition of school climate from the National School Climate Center. GLSEN has done amazing work in this area, but you can see things like 68.7% of LGBTQ students actually experienced verbal harassment. And you can see students that were physically harassed and verbally harassed and physically assaulted. This is an issue that we need to continue to be at the front of and do something about. The problem is, over the past few years, this has become a lot more difficult. And it's interesting because when I wrote Dignity for All, Safeguarding LGBT students, I wanted this book to be irrelevant within a couple of years. And you probably don't hear an author saying that, but I wanted my doctoral research and the book to be completely irrelevant in a couple of years, because I kept thinking there are laws coming out and this is not going to be an issue, but it still is. And that's something we have to be able to acknowledge. We can't put our head under the covers and act like this is still not an issue. This is still very much an issue. In fact, from an article from Education Week that came out recently, 28 states have considered or passed bills that would prohibit transgender girls from playing on sports teams, according to a tracker maintained by the ACLU. But it's not even like the outward stuff that you see from these kind of laws or legislation that is being passed. It's also about the insidious things that happen. One of you wrote about the hypocritical nature of feeling like we're doing something about it, but knowing that it's not. This is an example of how this looks like. Because I was about to go into a state to give a keynote to all their school leaders for their very large district. And I had just done a segment for A Seat at the Table on critical race theory. And 2 hours after it was finished, I got an email from the person that I was going to be working with. I was flying the next day and I was going to be working with them the day after that. And she wrote, "Hi again. Just got word that I needed to reach out to you to ensure that there are certain topics we are not able to discuss in professional development." And you can see, she wasn't worried because it was going to be instructional leadership. And sometimes I don't talk about LGBTQ students because it doesn't fit into the topic that I happen to be talking about. But she said, we cannot discuss current events, highly debated or controversial elements or events like Black Lives Matter, equity, or LGBT issues. I wrote her back and said, well, this wasn't a topic that I was thinking about talking about, but now I'm totally interested in putting it into my keynote. And she said, thank you for understanding. And I actually replied, seriously? ? I don't understand at all. And she came in the next day to meet with me, and she told me that a parent group tried to ban me from coming. That's where we are in some places, that people want to ban the conversation. So for those of you that are looking at how to include and be more helpful, let's not ban the conversation. Let's make sure that we're actually engaged in the conversation, as scary as that might be. Listen, when I'm running the show, A Seat at the Table, I will talk about race, and I am a white man with privilege. And there are things that come out of my mouth that some of my guests have looked at me and they're like, let's wait a minute. Let's unpack what you just said. It is a frightening moment to be called out when you're doing your own web show, but it's some of the most important learning that we could be doing. If you want to really help your LGBTQ students, don't be afraid of having a conversation. Too often we are looking to ban conversations, and the insidious part is not only the legislation, it's the fact that there have been studies over the years to show that librarians or library media specialists have actually self-selected not to have books on LGBTQ students within the library. And that is something that is very insidious in the way that they're not banning books. It's not a fire where they're throwing the books in. They're just choosing not to have those books within their libraries or within their classroom libraries. So part of it is about not being afraid to have the conversation, even if it is something that scares you. And it is uncomfortable work. Acronyms. You have heard me talk about the difference between calling my book LGBT to LGBTQ to LGBTQ+. I am not, and I say this respectfully, I am not always concerned about the full acronyms that you use. What I am concerned about is that you as a county school district, you as its schools, actually agree on what acronyms are going to work. Because on the other side of this is that there are people that get very uncomfortable with acronyms. This is not any different than what I will talk about sometimes with teachers to say, stop dropping acronyms to parents, because as soon as you drop an educationalese acronym, you're going to lose them. This is about develop this together. What does this acronym mean? Bring people into it, because some people just really don't know. Sexuality, race, gender are often very uncomfortable topics. And I know this because of not only because of the pushback I've received from writing a blog over 10 years or being banned from talking about something when I'm presenting, but it's also because of when I'm moderating a chat on A Seat at the Table, there are certain conversations that I think I'm prepared for, and then I find out through my questions that I wasn't as prepared as I need to be. So be okay with the fact that if you don't know enough about it, be okay to put yourself out there and go in with a learner's mindset. I always go into situations with a learner's mindset. What we also know, though, is it's not always that fair, is it? It's that the fact that personal beliefs get in the way. People will bring up religious reasons why they can't be on board. They will bring up personal beliefs, and that gets in the way. And what it always comes back to me as is when I'm looking to say, but we're here to engage students. We are a public school system. And believe me, I've had parents I have had parents that have come in to complain about books that we were using at the elementary level, and they actually complained about it so much that there need to be a special group to get together to vote on whether the book could be used in the school where I was a principal. And then it went to the board level as well. And I had parents come in to see me and they said, I know that there are gay people around. And I have to admit that I looked at them and I was like, do you think they're close? Because they seemed to have no idea about me. But one of the things that I kept in mind was that I said, I am a principal of a public school system. All of my students should feel welcome here. And I knew for a fact that we had lesbian and gay parents, and I was not going to make them feel uncomfortable because of somebody else's personal beliefs. So yes, it takes leadership as well. I'm going to end with a couple of things that I think are really important to keep in mind. There is research, and this citation is from 1997, but it's actually from 1977. The research goes back, and there's a thing called self-efficacy. And I want all of our students that sometimes think the adults don't get it. And I want some of our adults to understand that sometimes kids or students don't get it. To just step back, and maybe it's the meditation that I do every day, but to step back and say, maybe this is a self-efficacy issue, because self-efficacy refers to the confidence we have in our own actions. And what the research out of Stanford has shown for many, many years is that self-efficacy is context specific. I feel comfortable talking about this. I don't feel comfortable talking about that. And you will have teachers that will avoid a topic because they're worried about saying the wrong thing. So how can we help them understand that sometimes you are going to say the wrong thing? This even matters for school leaders, because what the research also showed from the same researcher, Bandura, who recently passed away, is that when leaders feel efficacious, when they feel confident, they're going to double their efforts. But when they don't feel efficacious, they're going to slacken their efforts. And what that means is that very story I told you about getting turned down by a lot of schools in New York State actually fits into what this research says. They were uncomfortable with me asking them questions that they didn't feel confident answering. So what did they do? They avoided the topic altogether. What I love about a night like tonight is that you're not avoiding the topic. And even though some of you may think you're not doing enough, please know that the fact that you're here and you're actually engaging in this topic is a really huge step that other people are not taking. What I'd like to finish up with is some enabling conditions. It starts with school board policies and student codes of conduct. This is some of the recommendations that I wrote in my doctoral research, but also within my book as well. School board policies and student codes of conduct need to have language that specifically say that it will not be tolerated that students are being bullied based on race, gender, sexual orientation, gender expression. But keeping in mind things like self-efficacy is that this is only going to be worth the paper it's written on if we don't do something about it. And too often leaders don't do anything until there's a problem. So it takes people like Ferris to be here. The fact that Ferris is here, yes, I know him and I know his wife, but the fact that he's here and he's supportive of this and he's the first one to reach out to ask me to be here shows that leadership from the top down actually cares about this. And that is an enormous step. Images in hallways. This came from my friend Tim Lauer. He's out of Portland, Oregon, but he posted this on Instagram years ago, and I said, can I take it? And he said, yes. And imagine what it's like to be able to walk into a school and see a representation of you. There are so many schools that when you walk in, they're heterosexual images. But the schools that are the most amazing to me are the ones that when I walk in, I see safe space stickers, or the Human Rights Campaign, or I've seen billboards that have the different verbiage when it comes to LGBTQ plus and what each one means. Those images, and when we talk about a gay-straight alliance, what images do we have around that to not just show heterosexual students, but also homosexual or gay students as well? What it also moves into is inclusive curriculum. we need to make sure that we've got curriculum, just like Rob was talking about, that actually include LGBTQ students within them. And there are plenty of children's books that are completely appropriate, up to youth novels, to textbooks that can have this kind of work. And we also know that there are a lot of organizations, especially GLSEN, that actually have curriculum that teachers can download for free. It also means that when we go into libraries, I remember going into libraries and seeing sections for LGBTQ students. That is huge, to be able to at least have those books available for students to be able to take out, to show, to make sure that you're putting out there that positive representation. But it also means that we have to focus on things like mindfulness. And why is this important right now? Because what we know from what students said at the beginning of this presentation and what we know during COVID is that mental health and well-being is actually important for adults and students. And when we can focus on things like mindfulness, and we can talk about that whole idea of breathing and really thinking about not what we control, but how we react to what we don't control. That's where these kind of things come in. What this means is that when we come into these topics that can be highly explosive in some schools, and I've certainly been in some of these schools, it means that we can step back and breathe and get an understanding of what is the best step we can take from right now. And like I was talking about with acronyms, making sure that we have a common language and a common understanding. We know that there are students that are here. We know that there are adults that are a part of this that are often the ones that are at the forefront of this work. But what we need to be able to do is sort of take a step back and make sure, and I can see that Rob is putting some great resources in the chat box as well. What we have to understand is that we have to take a step back and make sure that we have that common language and common understanding, especially where acronyms and pronouns are concerned, because some people just don't know. And then last but not least is that we need to have training from professionals who can keep it simple. And what I mean by that is that when you can have people come into your schools and actually train adults, teachers, administrators in a way where they can find the entry point for what those teachers and leaders really need from what this work is. For me, it's about not just talking about LGBTQ+, but it's talking about marginalized students as well. We need to have training from professionals who are going to give us simple places to start and connect it back to that student engagement piece. So I am going to leave it there with you, Ferris. I'm going to at least thank you to I'm going to call out Rob. Wow, I thought we were behind banning conversations about how to best support students in their schools. We are not, Rob, but be thankful for where you are because of all the work you've been doing. Naomi, I love that you just hit on the issue that you need to be vulnerable and it's uncomfortable work. It is, but accepting you have more to learn is part of the learner's mindset. Rob, thank you for the resources. And Susan, if a student requests BH supports, call and request a callback from a screener and access to have the screener will make an assessment and help with the connecting of services. All right, that is, thank you for putting that in there. But I'm going to turn it over to you, Ferris.
Peter, thank you so much for that. You know, I was the one that wrote that I was hoping to be inspired to continue the advocacy. And I have to say, I feel absolutely inspired. So many pieces of what you're talking about really resonated with me when I think about talking about self-efficacy. And for a lot of us in education who have to get into that uncomfortable space, and as Noemi said, to be vulnerable and to be able to overcome our own kind of challenges, to be able to address these systemic challenges. I felt like you hit on so many important topics, and so I feel like I want to unpack a lot of the things that you brought up. But I am so grateful for your work. You are clearly somebody who connects so well with young people and with adults as well. And I'm just so grateful that you're here to talk to us about your experience and also connecting some of the work that you do day to day with the work you've done all your life as a member of the LGBTQ community, but also somebody who dedicated time with your dissertation on this. So on this topic, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your powerful message today. I was hoping if you feel something you'd like to say to Dr. DeWitt, please put it in the chat. If there's anything that you resonated with, that you a takeaway that you'd like to share, please, I'm sure that he would love to hear from you, and just so grateful for you to be here, Dr. DeWitt. It is now my pleasure to introduce a group of young people who are going to be kind of taking this stage and sharing bringing their voice to the table. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen once again. And I have the pleasure of welcoming, let's see if it loads up here, 4 wonderful young people who are going to be speaking with us, 2 of which you've already met. Tashi, who's a junior at Santa Cruz High School, Q, who's a junior at Scotts Valley High School, Xanthi, who is a senior at Pacific Collegiate School, and Olivia, who is a junior at Scotts Valley High School. They're going to be sharing a little bit of their stories and their experiences. And I'm also going to welcome Celeste Gutierrez, who is our coordinator of student leadership and engagement, who works with our students and the different groups of students leadership councils that the County Office of Education has established over the last couple of years. So welcome Tashi, Q, Xanthi, and Olivia, and welcome Celeste.
Thank you, Ferris. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for investing your time with being with us on a Monday evening. My name is Celeste Gutierrez. I use she, her, ella pronouns, and I am tonight student panel facilitator. Today we have an amazing panel where we'll be hearing from Santa Cruz County students on what we need to keep our eyes on that could directly impact their success. Our goal today is that whatever your role is, that you will come away with something, a new idea, a fresh perspective, a new strategy that you can apply to be more inclusive. I'll kick off the conversation by asking questions that draw out some of the actions we should be thinking about and implementing. So perhaps everyone would like to share their name, pronouns, schools.
My name is Q Licht. My pronouns are he, him, and I go to Scotts Valley High School. And also, thank you so much for having us today. I'm really glad to be here.
Hi, I'm Olivia Tinetti. I use any pronouns. I'm also a student at Scotts Valley High School.
Hi, my name is Xanthi Schwarzman, and I go to Pacific Collegiate School. And my pronouns are she and her.
I'm Tashi Leem. I go to Santa Cruz High and I use they, them pronouns. And like you said, thank you all so much for having us.
Thank you. And I know we've all been transitioning to back in person from distance learning. So what changes have you seen your school make from distance learning back to in-person teaching, and how has that impacted you and or other LGBTQ plus students?
I'm really grateful to have a support network of friends and staff members who are there for me. As a queer and transgender student, I was nervous to be back in person, especially since I came out at school as transgender last year during distance learning. So this was my first year on campus being out as trans. And one of my big safety concerns was bathrooms. So I was really glad to see that as of this year, Scotts Valley High School now has 2 all-gender student bathrooms. There are 2 bathrooms in the student union building that were previously a men's and women's room. And I would love to see the momentum continue for the bathrooms with putting menstrual products in the formerly men's room and creating privacy around the urinals there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I connect with that a little bit. I was gifted a new name over quarantine. So I was also little bit had some mixed feelings about coming back to school with a new name, and I think that it's overall been a very positive experience, and the bathroom thing is also really important. We just had a first traveling band competition on Saturday with the band, and it made me realize that we're very lucky here because the high school we were having a competition at did not have gender neutral bathrooms. And so I think that that's obviously something we should be spreading awareness to other counties, but I'm really proud of our schools here for having that available.
I noticed that some teachers started using pronoun forms for students to fill out in the beginning of the year, which I think is pretty awesome because some students, like myself, have a hard time going up to a teacher or saying out loud in class, hey, these are my pronouns. So it kind of gives like some sort of anonymity.
I definitely agree that this year was a lot better, and that every teacher, when in the introductions at the beginning of the school year, every person was asked their name and their pronouns, and so everyone giving this openness, so everyone has to share, or they could choose to pass, but everyone giving it an option to share allows like a much safer and easier way for queer people to come out and share their pronouns.
Thank you. And what would you all like your teachers to do to show their support of the LGBTQ plus community? Like, what actions or attitudes would you like your teachers to have?
I guess more respect mainly, and when addressing issues, and also to be more open when acknowledging people's pronouns.
My answer to this question is a story. So a student that I know had a really positive experience coming out to a teacher as trans while being partially closeted. And the teacher introduced themselves at the beginning of the year. So sorry, my cat's running around. Sorry if you can hear her. The teacher introduced themselves at the beginning of the year with their pronouns and gave all the students a form with a section to put their pronouns. And the student felt safe enough in that class to put down their pronouns. And then the teacher came around and kind of inconspicuously asked them where it was safe to use those pronouns for that student. And it really meant a lot to them to have that trusted adult at school who would use their pronouns. So some things that teacher did that signaled to the student that their classroom was a safe space were introducing themselves with their pronouns and providing a discreet way for students to tell them their pronouns, like Tanetti was talking about. And I don't know that every teacher has the resources to do this last one, but checking in with students who aren't entirely out where it's safe to use their pronouns and name if applicable can really help those students feel seen in an environment where they probably really don't.
Especially
Yes.
when, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
With like, with like, when teachers meet with parents and stuff, and making sure that, and if the teachers are very open, then it's easier for if like a person's not out to their parents yet, they can still have the correct pronouns be used at school, but not but it's still like not be out to their parents.
Yeah, I noticed one or two of my teachers had like introduction forms that included a space to put pronouns and then just like a little thing to check a box where it's like it's safe to use these with parents everywhere in this class and with administration, whatever. And I think that that's like the fact that so many teachers are beginning to integrate that into just like everyday introduction, start of year things. I think that that's a great step in the right direction.
That sounds so cool, Tashi. And I know it can be really tricky because especially in schools with like Scotts Valley High School has over 700 students, we can't ask teachers to try to memorize like when and where to use the pronouns of every student, but every little bit helps for every student whose pronouns you can use. Like you're making them feel that much more safe and that much more themselves at school.
Another thing I think a teacher should do is make more resources that for LGBTQ plus people, make them more, sorry. I think they should make resources that are beneficial to LGBTQ plus community more aware so they have access to it and they can be more comfortable in their school life. And also making aware of events that are happening in the community so people can be more involved.
Speaking of
Thank you.
resources, our high school counselor at Scotts Valley High School, one of them, just sent out an email to all the teachers today about LGBT History Month. And she emailed me before doing that and asked if she could also send out a link to the Purple Sticker Project, which is something that I've been working on for the past year or so. And I'm going to post the link to that in the chat. But the mission of the Purple Sticker Project is to make books and media with positive LGBT representation more accessible to students.
Thank you. Thank you all for that insight. And speaking of resources and topics, how would you like teachers to address the LGBTQ plus topics in the classroom? Like what would be beneficial? I know you guys talked about resources, but is there like how would you like for them to be addressed?
I would like them to be addressed with like full, accurate knowledge of the subject in order to avoid blanket statements and misconceptions, because it's really easy to shape the minds of people, especially teenagers and middle schoolers and even elementary schoolers. And I also think that LGBTQ topics should be taught earlier than high school so younger students can learn about different identities. Personally, none of my schools have ever talked about LGBTQ plus topics at all. I got most of my information from the internet, which probably isn't a good idea. And there's probably other students who have done the same thing. And the internet is a vast place. And there's so many things that can shape the minds of people and so many misconceptions. And I think that would be very harmful for the LGBTQ plus community. And yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Just having more like consistent and reliable knowledge in teachers and shared in school. And I also want to add, I think that it was in Dr. DeWitt's presentation, he mentioned having outdated textbook, like source material and resources in school. And I think it's really important for teachers just to acknowledge that some of the things that they're teaching from are old and outdated or have their issues, and to try to bring in more things rather than to like justify whatever is wrong with the textbook or to keep teaching from something that clearly has issues with it. I think it's really important for people to just understand that there is going to be things that were given in school that aren't perfect, like there's no such thing as like a perfect educational resource, and to instead compile more resources and bring together more information so that it's as like reliable and not blanket statement-y as it can be.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like the most important thing would just be having LGBTQ topics like mentioned in general, because it's often very much ignored or only about AIDS or Stonewall and never about anything else, and or just addressing that with respect and having it be mentioned at all is just would be a great improvement.
Yeah, just like Xanthi said, I think respect is really one of the most important things for addressing LGBTQ plus topics in the classroom. I really want to see more LGBT historical figures talked about and LGBT inclusive health curriculum. Like for historical figures, we've heard enough they were roommates, right? I want to hear they were LGBT.
Yes, thank you. And our last question is, what is working in your schools right now to make you feel safe in being who you are?
I think no, you go ahead. All right. Okay. Well, I think that a lot of the things that we were talking about earlier were things teachers can do. The teachers that are doing that, that's like really helpful, like having these things to share pronouns and also inclusive bathroom spaces. And then I think that just like there's creating this welcoming culture and community, a lot of like what we were hearing about earlier, I think that that's starting to develop a lot more in some schools, and it's important to have that culture in the administration and in the teachers, and then that goes to the students, and having like just a welcoming student body is really great and important.
Yeah, like events that our school puts on and other things that like the art clubs and stuff, which create a really good community, and that leads to a lot of safety at the school.
I have a lot to say about this one. So something that makes me feel safer to be myself at my school is all the teachers who remember to use my pronouns. And I know that can be tricky in larger schools, but it's been really beneficial to my mental health to be able to be myself at school in that way. And it's also really awesome that we have a GSA club. When I was in middle school, I tried to start one and it didn't work out, but now both the Scotts Valley middle and high schools have GSA clubs. And I mentioned earlier, one of our school counselors, Ms. Danner, sent out an email to all the teachers with resources about LGBT History Month, and that included the link to the Purple Sticker Project. And finally, I'm just really grateful to see everyone here today who's listening to us, who's listening to students share about what's going on in our community from our perspective. So thank you again.
Thank you all for your insight. I really appreciate it. And I will reiterate that I always mention how it's so important for students to have a seat at the table, and the fact that you are all here sharing your ideas is invaluable. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I'd like to join Celeste and thank our students for being a part of this, for really, if I were to try to capture, you all were talking about respect and how we can create a community and a culture of respect for our students that truly embraces and celebrates our students. And so I'm just so grateful for you for being here tonight, for talking to us, for giving us ideas of things that we can do. We are listening. We are absolutely committed and driven to work with you, to learn from you, and to support you. And I am just so grateful. I know that we didn't have a lot of time, but I have to tell you that your voices are so important, and in many ways are the highlight of every one of these equity series that we have, because often we don't get the honest opinion, the honest ideas of what we need to change and what we can do, what is working and what we need to continue working on. Thank you so much for everything, for being a part of this, and for your leadership, both in working with us as well as being here tonight. So please, if I want to ask the group to please send your thoughts to our students. If anything that they shared is really connected with you, please share that in the chat. I'd like to, we're going to get a chance now to take what we've learned from Dr. DeWitt and from our students, and to now share with each other and brainstorm ideas of what we want to be able to, what we need to continue doing to continue to support our students and creating these communities of respect. So we're going to be breaking up into breakout groups, breakout rooms, and have an opportunity to share a little bit more. We wanted to share with you that last time we spoke, and last time we had an equity summit with a focus on LGBTQ students, the recommendations from the group, one was to really focus on supporting students, as many students on the panel mentioned, utilizing pronouns and making that a part of what we do every single day in the way we connect with students. Ongoing training for educators and how to be an ally, creating and making sure that we offer gender neutral bathrooms at our schools, ensuring that locker rooms and changing rooms are safe, offering LGBTQ+ lessons with speakers and topics that are integrated across the curriculum at all grade levels, more education for parents and family members, including student voice and input regarding school decisions and policies. And you heard Celeste talk about having that seat at the table, and that is such a necessary part for when it comes to making sure that we are creating change that is going to be lasting, and having a GSA at every school. I think that in some ways we could say that Santa Cruz County has some of these components in place, but we have a lot of work to do, and that's why we want to hear your voices and your ideas about what else we can do to continue this work. We're going to be breaking out into rooms that include both adults and students. You may choose to participate or listen. You can choose to have your microphone and cameras on or off, and you can also use a chat to participate as well. And the questions that we're going to be asking you, what resonated with you from what you heard tonight? How will you use this information? And what should the Santa Cruz County Office of Education County LGBTQ+ Task Force focus on this year? And we continue to, there's so many things that we can work on, but we'd like to hear from you as to what our area of focus should be tonight. And so I'm going to ask our wonderful team to get us into breakout rooms so that we can participate and answer the questions. These will be facilitated, so there will be a facilitator that can help with this. And we will be getting back in about, I believe we have about 20 minutes for this activity, if I'm not mistaken. All right, and I believe that Melissa is the one who is helping us to put us into our breakout groups tonight.
That is true. I'm going to be opening up the rooms now. Enjoy your discussions.
So we just want to thank everybody for being here, and I know Ferris will follow up with this as well, but there are some great future events that we will put in the chat so you can see where the links are. But this coming Saturday, next Saturday, October 9th, we have the Queer Allied and Trans Student Summit. There's also a Parent Summit at the same time, put on by our Safe Schools Project and Queer Youth Task Force. It's an annual event. Remember, we've got the LGBTQ History Challenge game in October. We've got these trivia nights and ongoing equity events from Santa Cruz County Office continuing throughout the year. And in the mental health area, know that the mental health counselors and the number of people continue to have ongoing conversations about how to best meet the needs, many of the needs that were brought forward tonight. On the next slide, it just shows the flyers for those two events, and I'll put those links in the chat so you have them. And the other thing just to tell everybody is there's a lot of great stuff happening for LGBTQ History Month, and the link that's in the chat is one of those. And then the other part, here's the link for the summit. And the other thing that somebody brought up to me is that at the Santa Cruz MA, the Queer Santa Cruz exhibit in person is now available. So drop by and see the MA. For teachers, there's going to be a special reception for teachers in November. So we're all partnering together to provide better visibility and support for teachers, our administrators, and our schools throughout the county. So with that, I think, Ferris, you've got a final word there?
Just a word of thanks. Thank you to you, Rob. You've been helping us with a lot of this work, and we're very grateful to you. You know, we had a great conversation in our breakout group, and I'd like to just thank everybody for being here, for spending after a long day of work coming to participate, to listen, to connect with us, and also to share your ideas. I'm so grateful to Peter DeWitt for being our keynote today, as well as our amazing students who just continue to inspire us every single day. And we're so proud to be able to work with them, learn from them, and support them in this work. We do ask you to help us with completion of a feedback form. I believe we're putting the link in the chat, right, Melissa? There we go. Rob actually put it in there. Thanks, Rob. And so we always are looking to learn and improve. And so we'd love your feedback as to what about tonight did you appreciate? What do you think we could do differently and do better? One of the things that we talked about in our conversation was about the challenges we face in bringing students of color to these public forums. And that's something that we continue to work on and something that we are committed to doing. We have talked about future topics, such as talking about intersectionality as an important topic for discussion. We have lots of these events on an ongoing basis, and we would love it if you could join us. So we're going to continue to send you information. We'll send you information about the summary of what we talked about tonight. We'll also be sending you a link to the video and also an invitation to future events, future equity series events that are happening here at the County Office of Education. And we're hoping that you'll continue to be a part of these conversations and be an ally to our students and advocate for them as I know you are committed to doing. So with that, I would like to say thank you all. Thank you to the COE team for all your support tonight, to our facilitators, and thanks to our students, to Dr. DeWitt, and of course for you for being here tonight. Thank you so much. Please complete the feedback form, and we look forward to seeing you at a future Equity Series event. Thanks, everybody.